My Phil pretended to be a heritage advocate to seize my inherited mountain cabin, but I had a plan, exposed his fake claims, and what happened next left the whole family stunned. When I got the letter, I thought it was junk mail. It was buried under flyers and a dentist reminder, and for a second, I almost threw it out. Then I saw the name on the return address, Charles D. Whitaker, my godfather, the retired mountaineer who used to send me postcards from peaks with names I couldn't pronounce. He'd passed away a few months back, and I figured whatever estate business he had was already settled. I never expected anything from him. I never asked for it either. Turns out, he'd left me his cabin. My name is Ethan. I'm 36 years old, a mechanical engineer from Fort Collins, Colorado. My wife Cara and I don't have kids, just a couple of rescue dogs and a garage full of half-finished projects. The cabin was in the Rockies, near a place called Kremling. I'd been there once as a teenager with Charles, summer of '03, and even back then it had looked rough. Wood rot, leaky roof, no insulation. But it had charm, real bones, a kind of peace. When I told Cara, she lit up. She said we should fix it up, turn it into a weekend retreat. Maybe even a place I could tinker, build out a workshop in the old shed out back. Something of our own. She was excited in a way I hadn't seen in a while, and just like that, it became our plan. Until we told her father. Vincent. Vincent was the kind of man who smiled with his teeth, but never with his eyes. He was a retired executive from some company that made strategic growth systems, whatever that meant. The kind of guy who dropped phrases like passive income and early exit strategy into casual conversation. When Cara told him about the cabin, he took a slow sip of his wine and said, So Ethan's going to be a handyman now. Cara gave me a quick look. I smiled politely. It's a renovation project, I said. Shouldn't take more than a year, off and on. Vincent's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Well, I suppose if you're not chasing earnings, you might as well chase sawdust. I let that one slide. I'd let a lot of them slide over the years. He'd never liked that I was a mechanical engineer. Thought it was a support role job. He'd once said, at our wedding, no less, that Cara had downgraded from a hedge fund manager to a hobbyist with a toolbox. He laughed after he said it, but no one else did. At first, I chalked it up to his usual crap, but something about the way he kept asking about the cabin made my skin itch. Questions like, did Charles leave you the mineral rights, too? Or, are you sure there's no trust paperwork? Sometimes people misfile those things. He asked for the location, then the elevation, then who our neighbors were. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something else. Something heavier. I told Cara about it later that night, and she shrugged. He's just being him, she said. You know how he gets. But I wasn't so sure. Because the way Vincent looked at me when I mentioned the place, the way his eyes narrowed, the way he leaned forward, that wasn't how someone looks when they're mildly annoyed. It was how someone looks at something they want. The first weekend we started renovations, we brought sleeping bags, a shop vac, and enough takeout to survive the dust. The place was worse than I remembered. Mold on the back wall, half the floorboards warped. But under all that, it had soul. You could see it in the thick beams, in the way the morning light came through the slats, just right. Cara smiled the whole time, even when she found a dead mouse in the sink. It's perfect, she said, holding up a piece of water-damaged wallpaper. We're gonna make this ours. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Or at least, we thought it was. The first time Vincent showed up, he didn't call. Just pulled into the dirt driveway in his black Escalade like he owned the place. Cara was scraping paint off the front porch, and I was under the deck trying to figure out where the pipe leak was coming from. I heard the car door slam, and his voice cut through the trees. Well, you're certainly putting in the elbow grease. I crawled out, hands covered in mud and spider webs. Vincent, I said, brushing off my jeans. Didn't expect you. He waved that off like I'd offered him a lukewarm drink. I was in the area, he said, even though we were a good 2 hours from where he lived. Thought I'd see the famous Whitaker cabin. He stepped right over the half-sawed 2x4 like it was part of his property. Walked around the porch, hands clasped behind his back like a plantation owner surveying the fields. Cara looked up from her scraping. Dad, don't step on that. Too late. His foot pressed down on the loose plank she'd marked with blue tape, and it creaked hard. I warned you, she muttered. He ignored her. You're moving the support columns? He asked me. Yeah, I said. They weren't stable. He tilted his head. Charles always liked them where they were. Said it gave the porch character. I kept my face neutral. They were also rotting through. He didn't reply, just kept walking, inspecting the place like an investor, not family. That night, back at the fire pit, Cara tried to laugh it off. He's bored, she said. Mom's in Phoenix visiting her sister, and he's just floating. But he wasn't just floating. The next weekend, he came back. Again, unannounced. This time with a notebook. Said he wanted to offer suggestions. He criticized the paint samples Cara picked. Said they were too trendy. Told me the shed out back shouldn't be touched. Charles liked it rustic. Even questioned our plan to knock down the back wall and install new windows. You sure that's structurally sound? He asked, narrowing his eyes. You're not just winging it, are you? I reminded him, politely, that I'm an engineer. He smirked. Sure. Just don't want you to end up with a pile of firewood and a lawsuit. After he left, Kara found me out by the truck, jaw tight, staring at nothing. I know, she said softly. That night, our neighbor Greta stopped by. She was in her 70s, a retired park ranger with wild silver curls and a telescope on her porch. Saw that fancy car here again, she said, sipping from a metal travel mug. Your father-in-law, right? I nodded. Well, she said, hate to stir the pot, but I caught him out here Thursday too. Didn't see your truck. He was alone. Here? What was he doing? She raised an eyebrow. Pacing. Talking on the phone. Right there on your porch like it was his. Had a notebook. Kept pointing at things. Later that night, I found it wedged behind a drawer we hadn't touched yet. A leather sketchpad. Inside, blueprints, rough sketches of remodel ideas. Not mine, not Kara's. All in Vincent's handwriting. Notes about lot value, expansion potential, zoning codes. I didn't say anything to Kara. Not yet. Instead, I drove into town the next morning and bought motion sensor cameras. Because I needed to know exactly how far he was planning to go. Vincent didn't show up the next weekend. Or the one after that. For a while, I thought maybe he'd backed off. Maybe the sketchpad was just an overstep, not a warning. I was wrong. It was a Saturday morning, crisp and sunny. Kara was inside laying out fabric samples for the curtains while I was up on a ladder installing the last motion sensor. I just finished syncing the system to my phone when I heard tires on gravel. It was Vincent. But he wasn't alone. A man stepped out of the passenger's seat, mid-40s, dressed in khakis and a golf club windbreaker. Clean-shaven, expensive-looking watch, folder in hand. Vincent called up to me. Ethan, thought we'd drop by for a little chat. I climbed down slowly, every step heavier than the last. Kara came out behind me, drying her hands on a dish towel. This, Vincent said, gesturing to the man beside him, is Mr. Lovell. He's with a small estate advisory group I've used before. Brilliant guy. The man extended a hand. Miles Lovell. Nice to meet you. Vincent's told me great things. I shook his hand. Firm, rehearsed grip. I already didn't like him. Vincent smiled, like this was just a friendly neighborly visit. We've been discussing the potential of the cabin. Its history, its value, its place in the family, you know. Place in the family? Kara repeated, her smile faltering. Miles opened his folder. We'd like to propose placing the cabin into a family-managed trust. It would keep the property within the lineage and simplify things down the road. I glanced at Kara. She looked confused. I looked back at Miles. And what exactly is a trust inclusion agreement? He smiled, like he was about to explain basic arithmetic. It's a simple legal document that allows the asset, in this case, the cabin, to be pooled under a jointly managed entity. You'd still technically have access and use, of course. Technically, I echoed. Miles laughed nervously. Well, yes, it's more of a stewardship arrangement. Ensures protection, family consensus for decisions, generational planning. He handed me the document. I didn't open it yet. So who would manage this trust? Vincent cut in smoothly. Naturally, I'd be named as acting trustee for the initial phase. Just to keep things stable. Of course. I opened the packet and flipped through the pages. It was dense, but I'd seen enough contracts in my life to spot the landmines. Vague terms. Loosely defined control clauses. No clear exit plan. A few blank lines that could be filled in later. It wasn't just shady, it was a blatant setup. You want me to sign over this property, I said slowly. To a trust you control. Miles blinked. No, not control, manage. Temporarily. I turned to Vincent. Did Charles leave anything to you? Vincent straightened, defensive. He and I were close. He spoke often about family continuity. Legacy. And yet, I said, flipping to the last page, your name doesn't appear in the will. I've seen it. That made Miles shift uncomfortably. Do you know what I do for a living? I asked him. He blinked. Vincent said you were a technician? I'm a mechanical engineer. Licensed. Also took property law courses while working for a firm that handled rural development permits. I've seen real estate power plays before. I held the contract up like trash. This isn't about legacy. It's about leverage. Miles' smile faded. I think maybe we should reschedule. No, I said. We're done here. Vincent stepped forward. Ethan, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I turned to Kara, locking eyes. This was never about family. He wants control. And he thought I was too dumb to catch it. Kara looked from me to her father, then back again. Is that true? She asked him quietly. Vincent didn't answer. Miles cleared his throat. We'll just, head out. As they walked to the car, Vincent paused. You're being paranoid. I folded my arms. And you're being sloppy. After they left, Kara was quiet. She stood on the porch, staring at the road like she was seeing it differently now. You knew he was up to something, she said softly. Yeah, I said. Now you do too. That night, I made copies of the document and saved the camera footage from the motion sensors, just in case. Because if Vincent thought this was over, he didn't know who he was dealing with. It didn't take long. After the trust scheme fell apart, Vincent disappeared for a few days. No texts. No calls. I figured maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Maybe, just maybe, he backed off. But Vincent didn't back off. He regrouped. It started with Kara's cousin Jenna calling out of the blue. Hey, just checking in, she said, voice unusually sweet. You guys doing okay? I heard things are a little tense. I asked what she meant. Oh, nothing, she said quickly. It's just, well, your dad mentioned you two might be taking some space from the family. Said you've been, pulling away. Controlling things. Especially with the cabin. I didn't say a word. Just thanked her for the call and hung up. By the end of the week, Kara had heard from 3 aunts, 2 cousins, and her younger brother in Oregon, none of whom she'd spoken to in months. All echoing the same concern. Was Ethan keeping her isolated? Was she okay? Was she sure this whole cabin project was really her choice? Vincent had launched a whisper campaign. It was exactly his style, quiet poison dressed up as concern. He couldn't win the cabin, so now he was going to try to win the narrative. Kara tried to brush it off at first. He's just talking, she said. People gossip. But after the 4th text in a single day from her Uncle Ray asking if she needed to reconnect with her roots, she snapped. He's painting you like a manipulator, she muttered. Like I'm some brainwashed idiot and he's the last sane one left. That night, she called his sister Margaret, the family ringleader, the self-appointed matriarch. The kind of woman who wore pearls to brunch and referred to family drama as episodes. Hi, Aunt Mags, Kara said, voice tight. Let's just get to it. I know my father's been making calls. There was a pause. Then Margaret sighed. Kara, we're just concerned. He says you've changed. That Ethan's assertive. That he's trying to keep us out of the family's legacy. Legacy? Kara snapped. That cabin was never part of his legacy. It was Charles's. He left it to Ethan because he respected him. Well, Margaret replied coolly, Vincent says otherwise. And Vincent, Kara said, voice cold now, also brought a fake legal advisor to try and trick us into signing away the property. Did he mention that part? Silence. Kara didn't wait for a response. I'm not interested in family traditions that revolve around manipulation. And I'm definitely not going to sit back while he lies about my husband. Then she hung up. Later that night, she sat on the porch steps, her arms around her knees, the stars spread out above us. I hate that he's turning this into a war, she said. But if he wants one, he's going to lose. I nodded. We'll document everything. Every call, every message. I already had copies of the footage from the advisor stunt. I'd started compiling screenshots of texts from his concerned allies. If this kept going, I'd be ready. Because Vincent didn't just poke the wrong guy, he tried to tear down the one place we were finally building for ourselves. And neither of us was backing down. 2 weeks later, we got the letter. It looked official, heavy envelope, nonprofit seal in the corner, all typed up like a press release. But the moment I saw the name at the top, I knew exactly who was behind it. Kara read it aloud at the kitchen table, her voice flat. This notice is to inform you that the Whitaker cabin has been flagged for review as a potential historical preservation site due to its proximity to registered trails and its architectural alignment with pre-war backwoods structures. She stopped, blinking at the paper. What does that even mean? I took the letter and read it again, slower. Then I set it down and sighed. It means your father is trying to seize the cabin using a loophole. We sat in silence for a minute. He's trying to make it public? Kara finally asked. No, I said, rubbing my eyes. He's trying to get it designated as a protected structure so he can block any renovation and maybe even force a sale to a conservation entity. It wasn't the first time I'd seen this kind of tactic. I'd worked on projects in the foothills where developers tried the same thing, use historical preservation laws to freeze properties and buy them cheap once the owners got fed up. The kicker? You needed access to building records and land use filings to even start the process. And Vincent didn't have that. Unless. Greta confirmed it 2 days later. She showed up on our porch, arms crossed, mug in hand. You didn't hear it from me, she said, but a little birdie down at the Parks and Land Use Board said someone from the Mountain Heritage Trust submitted a formal claim about your property. Cited private planning documents that were never made public. Kara frowned. How would they get those? Greta gave her a long look. Because someone on the nonprofit board accessed them without clearance. We didn't say anything for a second. Then Kara said quietly he used his nonprofit connections. Yup. That same night, we got a call from her cousin Rachel, the one who worked in the Mountain Heritage Trust fundraising office. Don't quote me, Rachel said immediately, but there's been some chatter. Apparently, Vincent requested internal records under the guise of compiling a donor pitch. He slipped in a few requests for archived building reports, including yours. That's illegal, Kara said. Rachel sighed. It's unethical. And technically a violation of policy. Board members aren't supposed to use credentials to dig into private holdings. Has anyone reported it? I asked. There was a long pause. Then Rachel said, they have now. 2 days later, a very short email arrived. This is to inform you that Vincent M. had voluntarily stepped down from the Mountain Heritage Trust Board of Directors, effective immediately. No signature. No fanfare. Just a quiet disgrace. We didn't hear from Vincent that week. Or the next. But something had shifted. The calls from his concerned relatives slowed. Some even apologized. Kara's cousin June sent a sheepish text that said, didn't realize what he was up to. We're on your side. The family current, the unspoken, invisible tide that always seemed to flow in Vincent's direction, was beginning to turn. One evening, as we sat by the cabin fireplace with takeout spread across a folding table, Kara looked at me and said, he thought if he couldn't get control, he'd ruin it for us instead. Yeah, I said. And he failed. She smiled, just a little. You think he's done? I shook my head. He's humiliated, not defeated. Because people like Vincent don't stop when they lose. They just wait for the next angle. And sure enough, one was coming. It was a Tuesday when the envelope arrived. Thick paper, official letterhead, return address from a firm in Denver I'd never heard of. I opened it at the workbench, expecting maybe another formality about the preservation filing. Instead, it was a lawsuit. Vincent was suing us. Kara found me staring at the pages in silence, jaw tight. What is it? She asked. I handed it to her. Your dad's next move. She scanned the first few lines, her mouth falling open. Petition for managerial rights over shared family asset? What the hell does that even mean? It means he's trying to argue that the cabin isn't just ours, I said. That it's a family trust property and he deserves control over it, as some kind of steward. Even though it's in your name. Even though the will is crystal clear. I nodded. He's banking on confusion. On the court seeing us as amateurs and him as the responsible party. Kara sank into the chair across from me, pressing her fingers to her temples. He's really doing this. The claim was ridiculous, full of inflated nonsense. Vincent asserted that he had made significant financial contributions to the property, that he'd assisted with historical research and preservation, and that Charles, my godfather, had expressed verbal intent to have the cabin preserved under Vincent's guidance. There were no receipts, no documents, nothing except his signature and a list of vague anecdotes. But that didn't mean we could ignore it. We spent the next 3 nights gathering everything. Copies of the will, the deed transfer, photos of the state of the cabin when we arrived, itemized receipts from contractors, materials, tools, our bank statement showing exactly who paid for what. I organized it all in a digital folder labeled Defense. Even more damning? I found emails. Tucked in an old thread between Vincent and Kara from years back. He'd once mocked Charles for being a hermit in a shed. Said the cabin was a waste of land and that they should bulldoze it and sell the lot. Not exactly the words of a man devoted to family legacy. But the best break came from a completely unexpected place. Kara's Aunt Teresa, one of the few in the family who hadn't picked sides, emailed us a PDF. It was a scan of a postcard Charles had sent her 5 years ago. It read, left the cabin to Ethan. He gets it. Not flashy, just steady, the kind of man who builds things instead of talking about them. Kara stared at it, tears rising. He saw through him even then. We printed everything, made copies, and met with a lawyer, someone I used to work with during a zoning project. She read through it all and said, this isn't even a close case. But we'll go through the motions. People like him usually need the public embarrassment to finally back off. Kara nodded slowly. He's not just trying to win anymore. He wants to break us. Well, I said, closing the folder, then he better prepare to lose twice. She looked over at me tired, but fierce. Let's take him down. And this time, we'd do it in a courtroom. The courtroom smelled like old paper and fluorescent light. Kara sat beside me, hair pulled back, fingers laced in her lap. Across from us, Vincent wore his best gray suit, the kind he reserved for charity galas and award ceremonies. His lawyer, some sharp-jawed guy from a boutique Denver firm, sat whispering something to him while flipping through a binder thick with nothing. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a permanent frown line between her eyebrows, called things to order. Vincent went first. His lawyer stood and launched into a monologue that felt more like a eulogy than a legal claim. This property represents decades of family history, he said, pacing slowly. My client, Mr. Vincent Harper, has been involved in every major event connected to that land, from caretaking to preservation efforts. It is not merely a piece of real estate. It is a legacy. Vincent followed with his own testimony, full of long pauses and forced emotion. Charles was like a brother to me, he said, voice trembling slightly. He didn't have children, but he always wanted the cabin to remain in the family. I remember standing on that porch with him, talking about heritage, about stewardship. He looked at the judge like a man testifying about a sacred monument. This isn't about ownership. It's about doing what's right. Kara didn't flinch, but I felt her hand tighten around mine. When it was our turn, my lawyer, Maggie Chin, sharp and steady, stood with the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need theatrics. Your Honor, what's being presented here is not a legacy dispute. It's a fabricated claim by someone with no legal standing, using emotional language to mask a complete lack of evidence. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood up slowly, adjusted the mic, and looked right at Vincent. Your Honor, Charles Whitaker was my godfather. I spent time with him. I built things with him. When he passed, he left the cabin to me because he trusted me to care for it, not because I asked, not because I expected anything, but because I respected what it meant. I pulled out our folder and handed the clerk copies of everything. The deed, the will, contractor receipts, purchase records, even a video from the day we walked into the cabin for the first time. Then I added the kicker, the postcard Charles had sent to Kara's Aunt Teresa. It's in his handwriting, I said, and it makes his intentions pretty clear. The judge scanned it, eyes narrowing slightly. Then she looked at Vincent. Mr. Harper, do you have any documentation proving financial contribution or shared ownership? Vincent cleared his throat. Well, no, but I've made calls on its behalf, raised concerns. I even submitted a preservation request, which was investigated and found to involve improper access to nonprofit databases, Maggie added. The judge gave a slow, deliberate nod. That matches the ethics report I received from the Mountain Heritage Trust. Vincent's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge turned back to me. Mr. Langley, your documentation is thorough. The will is valid. The ownership is legal. This court sees no reason to interfere with your rights. She looked back at Vincent. And Mr. Harper, consider this a warning. If you attempt to misuse legal systems or nonprofit affiliations again to pursue personal grievances, the consequences will be more severe than dismissal. Bang of the gavel. Case closed. Vincent didn't say a word. He just sat there, blinking, as if he couldn't quite believe the script had flipped on him. As we walked out of the courtroom, Kara reached for my hand. She didn't say anything at first. Then finally, with a voice barely above a whisper, you crushed him. I squeezed her fingers gently. No. He did that to himself? Outside the courthouse, the sun was just starting to break through the clouds. It felt like the first one we'd seen in months. News of the courtroom loss spread through the family like wildfire. At first, it was just silence, the kind that felt deliberate. No calls from Vincent. No awkward texts from the cousins who'd once echoed his concern. It was like everyone collectively decided to wait and see if he'd crawl back or double down. He did neither. Instead, Vincent imploded. It started small. A Facebook post from him, public, dramatic, and loaded with implication. Sometimes the people you raise turn their backs when you need them most. A daughter lost to arrogance and an outsider with no sense of tradition. No names. But everyone knew who it was aimed at. Then came the letters. Actual handwritten ones, mailed to her home, addressed to Kara. They were manipulative, expertly so. The kind of guilt-laced prose that had probably once made his own employees cry in performance reviews. I only wanted what was best for you. What was best for all of us. He's turned you against your own family. You'll regret letting him cut me out. Kara read the first one silently, then tore it in half. By the third, she didn't bother opening it. Just dropped it straight into the trash. One night, she stood by the fire pit behind the cabin, watching the flames with a hard look in her eyes. She held up a fourth letter, unopened, and tossed it in. It caught fire quickly, curling and blackening before disintegrating completely. I'm done, she said. Done trying to fix a man who only sees people as pawns. I nodded, letting the moment hang. It wasn't just the two of us anymore. Her whole view of family had shifted. The pedestal Vincent had once stood on, the wise, successful patriarch, was gone. Replaced with the truth. A man who used people, lied when he didn't get his way, and wore control like a second skin. Word of his antics started surfacing too. Kara's cousin Dan called one night, uncomfortable. Did you guys know Vincent told everyone he helped fund the renovation? Said he sunk thousands into materials and planning. I feel dumb for believing it. A few others followed. Apologies. Admittance. Even Margaret, the once loyal sister, sent a carefully worded message. Family means honesty. I should have asked more questions. Vincent was still trying to save face, but the mask had slipped. His grip on the family narrative was broken. At home, things got quieter. Simpler. Kara blocked him on everything. Emails, texts, even the house line he used to call from when he wanted to leave cryptic voicemails. One night, after a short, quiet dinner, she looked across the table and said, "He's not coming back from this." No, I said. He burned it down himself. She gave a small smile, tired, but real. I used to think peace meant fixing things with him. Now I think it means finally shutting the door. We didn't celebrate. We just reclaimed the silence. And this time, it actually belonged to us. It was early spring when we returned to the cabin for the season. Snow was melting off the pines, the creek out back was running strong, and the air had that clean, sharp edge to it. We had plans, a new back deck, some shelving for the workshop, maybe even a little firewood storage shed near the tree line. But something felt off before we even got out of the car. Kara noticed it first. "Did you leave the blinds half open in the kitchen?" "No," I said. "I haven't touched them since we winterized the place." We stepped onto the porch. The front door wasn't broken, but the deadbolt was loose, slightly misaligned, like someone had jimmied it and tried to screw it back tight again. Inside, it was worse. Nothing stolen. No mess. Just disturbed. My drafting notebook was on the floor. The cabinet where we kept our renovation sketches was wide open. Drawings of the back deck were spread across the table, one pinned down with a stone paperweight that hadn't been there before. Our measuring tape, usually hanging in the mudroom, was stretched across the living room floor. Like someone had been planning something. Kara walked in slowly, her face pale. "He was here," she said. "You know he was here." I went straight to the wall panel where I'd hidden the SD card from the motion cameras. Pulled it. Back at the truck, I plugged it into my laptop and scrolled. There he was. Clear as day. 2 weeks prior. Middle of the afternoon. Vincent in a puffy black jacket, walking through our cabin like it was still his fight to win. He paced through each room, stopping to study corners. Measured walls with a laser measurer. Took photos. Spent nearly 45 minutes inside. He brought blueprints. I watched as he laid them out across the table and traced over our designs with a red pen. He made changes, circled measurements, wrote new dimensions in the margins. He wasn't just looking around. He was planning a new version of our cabin, without us in it. Kara stood beside me, silent for a long time as she watched the footage. When it ended, she walked out onto the porch and pulled out her phone. She called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart," he said. His voice was calm, almost smug. "Thought I might hear from you." "You broke into our cabin," Kara said flatly. There was a pause. "I didn't break anything. Just checking on things. Making sure you weren't screwing it up. You had no right." He sighed. "You and I both know you're out of your depth up there. I was trying to help." "We're done," she said. "Listen carefully, Dad. If you come back here again, I'm pressing charges. I don't care who you are." "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed. "I was saving you from yourselves." "Then save yourself instead," she snapped. "You are no longer part of our lives. Unless you get help, and I mean real help, and apologize, you're done. You're out." There was silence on the line. Then he said, bitterly, "You're making a mistake." "No," Kara replied. "I made one for years. This is me correcting it." She hung up and walked back to the porch steps, hands shaking slightly, but her spine straight. We filed a report with the sheriff's office that afternoon. Nothing came of it immediately, no forced entry, technically, but the paper trail was growing. Back at the cabin, we cleaned up the mess, packed up the papers, and reshelved every plan we had touched. It felt like a violation, because it was. But later, as we sat on the back porch with mugs of coffee and the sun sinking low behind the ridge, Kara turned to me and said, "We start fresh tomorrow. New plans. Clean ones." I nodded. He'd come back one last time. Measured every inch like he still had a stake in it. But now, he was gone. And this time, the door wasn't just locked. It was closed. Mentally. Emotionally. Legally. Forever.